Welcome to the Northern Valley Board of Education Revelations. I'm Kathy Fable, and the following is my summary of the latest Northern Valley Regional High School Board meeting, expressing my opinion and perspectives after serving on the board for 2 terms since 2011. The views expressed here are my own as a resident and a taxpayer. Indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. A special thanks to Dr. George Kipple, who served Northern Valley for 3 terms and helped bring some innovative programs to the high schools.
Dr. Kipple, board member from Haworth, informed me last week sometime that effective today, he is resigning his position because he's retiring. And he's not here tonight, but obviously we should recognize him at some point. I believe it was 3 terms. He's been a pillar of that community, and we thank him for his service, but just so you know, when he does the roll call. And we can talk about it later, but in other parts of the meeting. But we will be asking for anybody who's interested, and then to send their interest in the meetings soon. What the process is, we interview people in public, and we vote, and we appoint that person until the next election.
Tonight, after my updates, we will have 2 presentations. So first will be our biannual state-mandated student safety interim report. That will be for the first half of this school year, and will be led by our building principals. Our second presentation of the night will be our annual technology update, led by Mr. Saleh and Dr. Chiquino. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to send our thoughts and prayers to the people impacted by the crisis in Ukraine. We are all touched in some way by this crisis, whether it be from watching the destruction unfold in television, having family members who are serving in the military, or have family and friends in Ukraine or Russia. We remain hopeful for a swift, peaceful resolution to this conflict. I'd like to start my update off by speaking about some very important legislation that went into effect today regarding hazing. We've reviewed our policies and regulations with regard to harassment, intimidation, bullying, and hazing with both of our attorneys, and made updates to the policies and regulations you will see on the agenda tonight. Our building principals have coordinated an awareness campaign that will encompass all staff, students, parents, volunteers, and will communicate the changes and updates and the serious potential implications of violating these laws and policies, which could include possibility of incarceration for students and staff, and very stiff fines. So we're really been trying to make sure that we communicate the heck out of this, make sure all of our students and parents and staff are aware of the changes. Quick COVID update. As you are aware, Governor Murphy announced effective March 7th, the statewide mask mandates in schools will be lifted. We are currently reviewing the updated guidance from the Department of Health, and will communicate any relevant information to the school community probably in the next day or 2, because there are some changes that impact everyone in terms of guidelines. Effective March 7th, it will be optional in Northern Valley for students and staff to wear masks in school and on school buses. So we will continue to offer weekly COVID testing on site on Mondays and Tuesdays at all 3 of our campuses from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. for all students and staff. During the week of March 14th, all New Jersey public schools will be administering the New Jersey Graduation Proficiency Assessment for grades 11, actually for just grade 11 students. This state and federal mandated assessment measures English, language arts, and math proficiency, and is a preliminary graduation pathway for students. All 11th grade students must participate in the exam. We would like to thank our principals and Mr. Austin for organizing the student assemblies entitled United We Stand on February 1st in honor of Black History Month. The feedback we've received so far has been positive. I want to give the board a quick update on the Hebrew language program. We met with the community members who were interested in us starting this program. After listening to them and conducting more research, we believe we have a plan to move this initiative forward, with the understanding that we are taking a risk in terms of its long-term success. So we have advertised for a Hebrew teacher for their position, and we've begun collecting student requests. At this point, we'll need to wait and see how many students have requested the course to ascertain the number of sections that we will need. And once the number of sections is established, we'll proceed with the hiring process. We should know by about May 1st if this initiative will come to fruition for the 22-23 school year. Simultaneously, as we were doing all of this work, community members reached out to the Israeli consulate, who has expressed interest in helping a college in New Jersey start a program which would feed into not only our program, but other school districts who are interested in starting a Hebrew language program. So we thank Mr. Boe for his due diligence on this and recommendations along the way. He always has the best interest of the students in the district at the forefront of his thinking. We will all need to have a little faith that we're going to be able to handle any of the challenges that come our way and not be afraid of failure. I think we can do this, and I think once we get a year or two under our belt, that it'll be a thriving program and will be a model for the rest of the schools in the state. We are so proud of the efforts that our students and staff have put into preparing for our school musicals. The performances will begin this weekend at MVOT with SpongeBob. MVD will be performing Legally Blonde next weekend. Tickets can be bought through the music department websites, and we encourage all of you to come out and support the hundreds of students who are involved in these programs. On the athletic front, we would like to congratulate the NVD girls bowling and boys indoor track teams for winning these state sectional titles. We also congratulate the wrestlers who advanced in the state tournament. And today, I believe our spring sports started, so we wish all of our springs, next week they start. They're going to be starting in the next week, so we wish our spring sports athletes and coaches the best in their season. I want to take a moment to recognize the retirement of Kathy Boncino, the principal of our Valley Regional Programs and director of Region 3. Kathy's been a pillar of these programs for many years, and we cannot thank Kathy enough for her steadfast commitment to excellence for the students in the Valley programs. Her tireless effort, work ethic, and passion are inspiring, and she will be truly missed. We wish her all the best in retirement. You'll see that on the agenda tonight. She'll be retiring effective August 1st. As far as HIV is concerned, there were 9 HIV investigations that occurred since our last meeting. 2 were found to be in violation of the district HIV policy. Disciplinary action was taken and counseling services were provided where appropriate. I will now turn the meeting over to Dr. Garage and Dr. Sabatini, who will lead our biannual student safety data presentation.
There were 2 presentations. The first was the Violence and Vandalism Report for 2021. One item of note was that NVOT had more than 2.5 times the number of HIB reports than Northern Valley Demarest.
So at NVOT for the first semester, we had 52 reports or investigations filed that had to be carried out. 14 of those 52 were confirmed to be violations of the harassment, intimidation, and bullying policy. That's a large number, but we do have to address every issue, and there's many reasons why HIBs occur. Certainly the pandemic is the most obvious, and probably the lack of social interaction of our students over the past nearly 2 years now. But they were addressed, and those are the NVOT numbers at the top. The 18A 48-12, reasonable suspicion for being under the influence of a controlled dangerous substance. During the first semester at NVOT, we had 17 students who were sent for a medical exam and chemical screenings based on that reasonable suspicion. And there were 7 positive tests that resulted from those 17 chemical screenings based on reasonable suspicion at NVOT.
And MVD, we had 10 students who were sent out for chemical screenings.
4 of those students tested positive for a controlled dangerous substance. 6 of those students tested negative.
And that OT separated category vaping or e-cigarettes for the first semester. We had 1 student in possession of vape or vape paraphernalia.
And at NVD, we had 4 students who were in possession of a vape or vape paraphernalia.
This question shouldn't shock you, right? And I'm sure you thought about it. But when you look at the HIV, the number of HIV investigations in NVRHS versus NVD, they're about 2.5 times on a relatively same student body, right? Same number of students. Why do you think that is?
Well, OT is a larger population, but that's not the reason why. Since September 1 of 2011, we're obliged to follow the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights. It's a law. Like from the day the law started, and we got training on it. We don't create an investigation. If a student says something inappropriate, or a staff member for that matter, we are obliged to investigate. I think the obvious answer, an overly simple answer, is the pandemic. We have a pretty active student body that's used to being not socially interacting as much. It's our job to investigate. I don't create them. The administrators don't create them. Students say something inappropriate and it gets reported, has to be reported, or we hear it, we're obliged to investigate it. It's that simple. Only 14 of those were confirmed hits.
Board member Donna Costello asked twice for the reason for such a disparity, but couldn't get an answer.
I understand
That doesn't mean
but
all
my
52.
question is not around the rise in incidents. My question is the number in Old Japan and VOT is 2.5 times that of NVD. And I was wondering if you had a perspective on why that is.
There would be longitudinal data that would show, because sometimes you have one building may be higher than the other.
My best response to the question would be that at any given point in time, I could be in the other situation where there might be a flurry of investigations, and these things come oftentimes in chunks. And sometimes it becomes where you have one incident, another person counterclaims, and now you have 2 incidents. And sometimes they entangle into one another. So I think they come in clusters at times, and by the end of the full school year, typically, we're typically pretty balanced out.
Yeah.
And you know, we try not to let that get into our head in our day-to-day. We don't really share numbers and go based on the data when we're working each day-to-day, because in the end, we figure it's going to shake out in the end that we're pretty balanced.
So you don't think there's like an underlying cultural difference between the 2 populations that are driving certain behaviors?
Well, every school takes on its own culture, its own appearance, its own facets, and I think that we work really hard to work as one district and to communicate the same values, the same messaging. If I send something out, I'm on the phone typically with Dr. Septine that morning, and we're collaborating. You know, we've had some transfer of different administrators, so there's some crossover in leadership where you know, we're all kind of moving in the same direction. I think this would be a atypical year. We went back and looked at some of our previous presentations. The numbers are much closer.
Last year, for example, at OT, we had 13 investigations during the same time. In 1920, we had
Versus 52?
20. What was going on in 2021? I mean, we were virtual part of the year, right?
And a lot of these cases are freshmen.
And 40-something% of our cases are 9th grade victims. About in the low 40s, 40-something% 9th graders. Coming from not being in school as much, how long were we in school last year? What was our school day? 4 hours?
Yeah, I wasn't looking at 2020 versus 2021. I was looking comparing the two schools. But let's move on.
Yeah, no, I would say that, listen, there's nothing wrong with looking at the data and looking for patterns, but you have to look at it longitudinally in both buildings and to see if you can infer anything from that with that snapshot,
Yeah.
right? So I don't think we can make big inferences from just one data point.
There have been many parents concerned over their children being sent out for drug testing simply because they were in the bathroom at the wrong time.
In this type of experience, and if the majority are coming back negative, then I think maybe there's some opportunity here to reflect on where in the process could we maybe, revise the judgment that's being put into the situation.
Right, but there is no judgment to be made. There is no discretion. It's right in the law, 18A48-12. It's stated in the law. Whenever a staff member, or us for that matter, has a student referred to us for reasonable suspicion, which is a lot more latitude than law enforcement, which is probable cause. We have more latitude and been given that latitude by the state of New Jersey. The student shall, not may be sent, shall be sent for a medical exam and a chemical screen. We cannot stop that process.
In my opinion, discretion and better judgment needs to be applied by the teachers or staff that are reporting these students. The next presentation was the Northern Valley Technology Update by the Director of Innovation.
Hi everyone. So this is our technology update. So we always start with our vision. We in the Northern Valley Regional High School District will foster and instill a culture that personalizes learning, prepares students for college and careers, and supports confident, responsible citizenship.
In my opinion, the number one purpose of technology is educational advancement. However, the district has not measured or quantified educational success of any students in any way.
This is the first slide from our technology presentation last year. To put us all on a time machine for a moment, it was a very, very different year. And the nature of that presentation felt completely different. The list of things that we had accomplished and that happened under the umbrella of technology were tremendous, much different scope than usual. The stuff on the left were the things that we were saying we typically do that we weren't able to do because we were hybrid and remote. The classroom walkthroughs, like trying to unpack and analyze SAMR across all the classrooms. And the things on the right were the new things that were really the heart of our focus, things like hybrid and remote learning and Zoom. So the things on the left, we were actually able to pick up where we left off the year before, and clicker's working, yes. And this was the last slide from that presentation, which is where we considered what will we be doing next. So I think this is just a helpful way for us to pick up where we left off with that presentation. Things we said we were going to continue to do, right? What's next? Monitoring our progress as we proceed through what still feels like uncharted territory. Continue using our one-to-one learning technology plan, goals and objectives to drive our work. Resume classroom walkthroughs, which we were able to do this year, and support new strengths that are being developed during hybrid and remote learning. Carry those strengths forward instead of just missing that opportunity.
When the district began the one-to-one program over 10 years ago, we were given a well-defined methodology to define success. Yet, the district has continually failed to collect meaningful data that monitors personalized learning. Instead, they like to tout that Northern Valley is an Apple-distinguished district, which simply means that we buy a lot of Apple computers.
So we have multiple data streams that we use to analyze and evaluate, better understand, and grow our use of technology across the district. These are the four main data streams. The first is our one-to-one learning technology goals and objectives document, which is a multi-year document, or blueprint, or a map for how we move forward. Classroom walkthroughs, and I'll show you a snapshot of those in just a bit. Surveys, those surveys go to, in this case, students and teachers. And our usage reports and analytics. So in a nutshell, this is coming from our one-to-one learning technology goals and objective document. We lay out these goals and they drive almost all of the decisions that we make as far as technology integration. And we use this document over the course of the 4 years that it's these are the running one-to-one program goals and objectives. It becomes a portfolio for us because it's a place we continually revisit, and we add, essentially we add evidence to it, right? Like artifacts of these goals being pursued and achieved. So the goals are, and I'll give you the highlights. Students and faculty becoming empowered learners or being empowered learners. All students and faculty being global collaborators. And it's amazing how we set these goals before the pandemic, and they seem almost like inevitable at this point. Some of these things. Foster a culture where educators are analysts and students are constructors of knowledge. All students and faculty will be creative communicators. And the district will ensure student and teacher preparedness and confidence by providing equity of access to hardware, software, and services. So those are our goals and objectives in a nutshell. This is, I'm going to show you the SAMR model in a second here. So we do classroom walkthroughs. What that means is, as observers go into classrooms, they bring a checklist with them in addition to all sorts of other things that happen while they're in there. And one of the things on that checklist asks the observer to identify the level of innovation with which technology is being integrated into that classroom. So the SAMR model looks like this. At the very bottom, we have substitution. This is familiar for many of you at this point, I'm sure, but at the very bottom, we have substitution. Just because it's at the bottom doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Substitution is you're using some piece of technology in lieu of the non-technology alternative, but there isn't a functional change or benefit. We presented on this at Texpo. We used coffee as an example. So if you can think of a substitute, if you can't get a cup of coffee in the morning, the thing you might grab instead, like a cup of tea, that would be a substitute, perhaps. Augmentation is a direct substitute with a functional improvement. So if you don't want to drink a 32-ounce cup of coffee in the morning, an espresso might be a functional improvement because you get the same thing you get from the coffee, but it's an espresso. You don't have to drink 32 ounces, you can drink 2, right? You get caffeine if that's what you're after. The next step up is modification. So this is where it starts to get transformative. Modification, anyone want to throw something out there with the coffee analogy? Frappuccino, right? Frappuccino. There's a significant task redesign. Is it even coffee anymore? And then at the very top, redefinition. When in the classroom, what this looks like is the task was previously inconceivable. So this is, if you can imagine, things that really, literally aren't coffee anymore, like coffee-scented candles, coffee soap. You're getting some elements of coffee in there, but it's really something different than what it was at the beginning. So this is a checklist that goes into the classroom. And this is what substitution looked like in 2020, before the pandemic and remote learning compared to this year. So we saw a drop in substitution. And this is at any given moment, right? So what those numbers mean is 31% of classrooms, if you walked in, you'd see substitution happening. That might look like writing on the smartboard, right, instead of a whiteboard, something like that. So there's a drop in that. There was an increase in augmentation, right, some kind of functional improvement. And there was negligible change with modification and redefinition. So that's about the same. The numbers that are really interesting here are the next two, and those are the cases where technology was not used in the classroom. So on this checklist, there's also a check where there was no technology being used, but that little minus sign there indicates technology could have been used in a beneficial way. Right? So technology isn't being used here, and there are some really meaningful ways it could have been used to enhance that lesson. That dropped significantly. That's the thing that we're really after. This is where's my spotlight. There it is. That right there. That's awesome. This is the flip side. Technology, and this is also really profound, I think, because it's 2022, where technology isn't being used, and it's a good thing, right? So there's no technology, but it's completely appropriate for the lesson. So that might look like a lot of the things that really hinge on face-to-face interaction, classroom discussions, things like that. So we saw that number go up. Another metric that we look at in these walkthroughs is the TPAC model. The TPAC looks at the intersection of content, knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, and technological knowledge. And we saw that same effect ripple through in here. So where you have to be using technology to be at the center of that Venn diagram, because there's less technology in play, right? Slightly less. There seems to be in response to remote learning effect. We're seeing it's deviated a little bit out of that circle, out of the center, with more of an emphasis on pedagogy and content. These are a few of the highlights from student surveys that went out with regard to technology. This question is asking, how often do you use digital accessibility tools, things like speech to text or screen modifications? And so you can see that the almost always, right, is the purple. The purple and the green are the numbers, the colors to look for here. Almost always and frequently. So many students make use of those tools and those features. This one is huge. How often do you use cloud collaboration tools? So that's a lot of that. Right? Things like Google Drive, Google Docs, and so on. Part of business as usual at this point. How often do you use technology to demonstrate your learning? So using tools like iMovie, visual portfolios, and purple and green. How often do you, this is a big one. This one actually really captures and speaks to the spirit of those goals, of those 5 goals and the one-to-one goals and objectives. Do you have access to the platforms and digital tools that you need to accomplish what is asked of you in schools? So you can see the almost always and frequently. And then this question, this next one, is the same question, but it's less about the stuff of school. And it simply asks students, do you have access to the platforms?
Some of the highlights featured reflect insignificant data points, such as the use of iMovie and other non-educational apps. And the value of in-person learning seemed to outweigh any technology usage in the classroom.
In-person learning was on the list. That's the one that's bright blue there. And so across the board, the practice that everyone seems to place the most value in is in-person learning. That's just really interesting. If that question was something we posed 2 years ago, it wouldn't get that kind of attention. And the other, I mean, if we take a look up at the top there, collaboration, student collaboration, personalization of learning, those are at the top. Challenge-based learning, problem-based learning, those are at the top.
The presentation then switched to usage and analytics, which should have detailed the software and technology used to provide educational advancement. But instead, the report covered inventory, the discard process, and accountability for lost devices. Again, there was no evidence of the success or failure of our one-to-one program.
Hello everyone, my name is Layne. I'm the Director of Technology. And I want to start with, I want to talk about usage and analytics, starting with inventory, because that is something we take very seriously. Technology inventory control is a whole of district effort, and it's a process that is based on process accountability and transparency. We go above and beyond what you might find in other school districts, and we've been working diligently over the last year to improve every aspect of there. For process, the system we use for documenting and recording inventory is called Asset Management by Frontline Education, formerly TIPWeb IT. It is governed by our Asset Management Protocols and Procedures document, which ensures we have controls throughout the life cycle of the inventory.
Each slide covered information that had nothing to do with usage and analytics for furthering education. Instead, the topics covered Zoom usage, bandwidth, network health, cybersecurity, and help desk requests, which keep our 10 on-staff technicians busy. The real question is, how has the $100 million plus investment advanced personalized learning at Northern Valley? Perhaps the most surprising part of the presentation was their next steps. While again there was an expectation that we could see how the millions of dollars spent each year was advancing our educational program, instead we learned of 3 goals. 1, outdoor Wi-Fi. 2, the need to buy more iPads to replace whiteboards. And 3, the district's switch to Canvas, a new learning management system.
Currently, the draft suggested was a 2.9% increase. The committee will obviously, like them, to sharpen their pencils and get below the 2% mark as we normally do. So I'm confident that they'll be able to do that.
Yeah, the main topic of our policy committee meeting was the new hazing law that is going into effect. We also discussed live streaming, which both of those policies are on the agenda tonight. Live streaming of board meetings and the hazing. I think what else we
I think it was both of it.
Yeah, that was the bulk of it. Yeah, that was the bulk of it. This hazing had a couple of components to it.
On the live streaming, I saw the revision of the policy. It mentioned specifically in times of, I think it said high risk health something. And I was wondering, does that mean that as a board we're leaning towards not?
No, and we'll resolve that tonight. So
Okay.
the language is, so when Michelle and I spoke earlier today. So when Michelle made the motion last time, if we had voted the last time, we'd be going against the policy that didn't provide for us. This language allows us to do it. And then at that point, it's the intention of the board, and as we discussed, and we can make that clear tonight, that as long as 5 people are in favor of it, that we plan on live streaming going forward.
So
Silly
allowing
question,
also,
but
right?
why?
Say again?
People allow the previous.
Oh, yeah, well, so the beauty of live streaming is not only so that if somebody's jammed up and they can't get here to the meeting, it'll sit online, so you can look it up. You know, not only do we not,
What was the question?
if the,
Keeping the previous meetings on our website, so people can
We don't have that built in. The only thing in our policy says the audio report. We don't have
the live stream videos.
Yeah, you're asking me to be archived, right?
Archive, yeah.
That's not something that we discussed. Then they would have to change a different section of the bylaws to it, because it says the audio recording would be kept.
So the audio recording would be available to anybody?
Correct.
Or just not the visual?
Yeah, live streaming is just a live stream, so it's not an archive.
There's document retention schedules in the state.
Yeah.
Or in the-
Yeah, there's like rules about retention.
Oh, no, nor would
Joe,
probably still
sorry,
archives.
the question,
Can you turn on the mic? Sorry.
my question was, the wording in the revision specifically points to in times of a high risk, like health concern. I'm wondering if that's not our intention, meaning like right now we're in green in this district, right? Low. If our intention is to live stream, then why does the policy revision say in times of a high risk?
So the language used, I didn't think the language, so the language used, the type of language that was used to other districts, correct, James?
I think the spirit of it, this has been a topic of discussion for a while now, and the spirit of it was to provide people access because people didn't want to come to venues and be around large groups of people.
Yeah.
So I think that was the spirit of it. I think there's nothing in there that would prevent the board from live streaming it.
Okay.
And we can vote on that.
Okay.
It's more if the policy prevented us from doing it, and it doesn't. So we could, once we make a resolution or ask for a vote on it, it's not in conflict with our policy, we can decide that that's what we're doing going forward.
The policy never prevented us from conducting remote meetings, as all public entities were permitted to do so since the start of COVID. Northern Valley has been having virtual meetings and allowing board members to attend virtually for almost 2 years.
So members of the community are now invited to comment or ask questions for the purpose of addressing any subject matter pertinent to or directly related to the operation of Northern Valley Regional High School District. Residents and non-residents are requested to begin by clearly stating their names and addresses. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per person. Please know that issues raised by members of the public may or may not be responded to this evening. However, every comment will be considered and a response will be forthcoming if and when appropriate. The board asks that members of the public be courteous and mindful of the rights of other individuals when speaking. Specifically, comments regarding students and employees of the board are discouraged and will not be responded to by the board. Students and employees have specific legal rights afforded by the laws of New Jersey. Members of the public should consider their comments in light of those legal rights of those affected or identified in their comments, and be aware that they're legally responsible and liable for their own comments. Having said that, can I get a motion to open to the public?
So moved.
And a second.
Richard Sundin, Old Tappan. I've got a big mouth so you can hear me. So first of all, I'd just like to congratulate the board for an excellent job you've been doing. The other day I was driving down Knickerbocker Road and I passed NVRHS High School. I'm a graduate of this school in 1964. Both my sons went to this school and graduated, got excellent education. This board, other boards have done a very good job. This school is like a college campus. Second to none. They are beautiful and we should be very proud. But what's happened is, I think we're forgetting the taxpayers that have promoted this school. I'm seeing a lot of people, I talk to a lot of my customers, they can't afford to stay in this area anymore because the taxes are getting so doggone high. And you're seeing an exodus. You're seeing empty stores in Norwood, you see in Old Japan, you see it in Closter. These businessmen cannot make a living anymore. They're working hard. They're not making the money because taxes, overhead. We're at a 10% inflation rate, and it's not going to stop. Tonight I was listening in the back here tonight, and I heard they were going to have a Hebrew class. How many students are going to sign up for this Hebrew class? Do we really need it? It's going to be another $125,000 for a teacher. Suppose I'm married to a Filipino. Is she be able to get a Tagalog class with another teacher? I think I got to start drawing the line because it's a tipping point. And the taxpayers are not going to be able to afford it. You're seeing a change in society. You're seeing it right here with all this technology. It's being a bigger divide. And as far as the budget goes, if we got excess money, like that lady just said, let's tape this meeting so people can look at it on their laptops at home because they're out breaking their butts trying to get home and make a living, and maybe they should know what's going on. With this extra money, put the cameras in the classroom so they know what the teachers are teaching. I think it's only fair. If the kid's acting up, the parents can cloud them themselves. In this way, you'll have no discrepancy about the CRT or anything else. Again, I thank you. I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Kathy Fable, Old Japan. First, I want to address that in March of 2020, Governor Murphy declared a state of emergency and allowed any public entity to conduct their meetings via Zoom. Obviously, I believe there's a board member via Zoom, Jessica Spillane, right now. So no policy is needed to conduct and provide Zoom meetings. So I'm not sure where you're getting that from. And you know, I think until that changes, if you want to have transparency, that would be a good thing. But coming to transparency and the policies, you failed to mention that, you know, you've always said, Joe, that you want increased transparency with parents and parent engagement. Yet we used to have 2 meetings a month. You stopped that. Now it's down to 1 meeting a month. And basically, December we didn't have a meeting. January there was one. February there wasn't one. I mean, now we're down to alternating months. But we used to open twice to the public per our policy, item number A, and that's no longer the case. And now I see that you're reducing the 5-minute person speech or comments to 3. So it doesn't really reflect positively on, you know, the goal of having more transparency. I wanted to talk a little bit about the surplus because a 2.9% increase is obscene. After being on the board for a number of years, there was multi-million-dollar surpluses year over year, with the district figuring out how to spend that money, plus a $3.7 million COVID donation to the district. So the idea that, and plus we have a $600,000 bond coming off the books in June, the millions of dollars of COVID funds, the increase in state aid, the reduced health care benefits, and with all of these reduced costs, a lower student body, and we're still looking to increase taxes. I mean, it's really obscene.
I'm trying to pay attention, but it was more also trying to pay attention to the plot. I like to tuck my kids in. I like to be home at night. So very important that we reorganize, and it's important that if we're coming out and there's an agenda, recognize your audience. I mean, there's people here, and you want to get home too, but what we have to say, we're limited to a certain amount of time. Technology report seems to run long. I'm not opposed to technology, but here's what I came to say. Back in September, my daughter was 3 weeks into school, and she was part of a HIB that resulted in an investigation. She was found to be with a jewel capsule. She had to get drug tested. I wrote a letter, many of you may remember, and it was like infuriating. It was hard to deal with, but as a family, we pulled together. And Tara really, she re-solidified herself. She regained the time that was lost from suspension and missing class. She's made good friends in school. Her teachers, I think, all like her. Unfortunately, she knows a lot of the administration now because she just recently got called back to the office. This time, not as part of the HIB. She was in the bathroom at a time where others were said to be vaping. Again, Tara said, and as with the first investigation, she came back negative, drug-free. A little shaken, but she's a tough girl. This time around, there was no paraphernalia. There was no, we saw her vaping. It was, you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. So now, we're even once more removed from what I didn't like of the first investigation, which was there was a vape capsule found. We didn't believe it to be hers, but now it's like, point out somebody and they have to get a drug test. So I don't know, and I asked at the time what my options were. My options were go get her drug tested, hope for the best. They didn't suspend her because we were able to get her paperwork in on time. But the other option is 5-day suspension, like ridicule from your friends. You've got the scarlet letter, and you've done nothing wrong. I don't know if being in the bathroom for a period of time, is something wrong. Here's a kid, a good kid, and I'd like to think they're all good kids. But we're not saving lives by this. I mean, the basis and the origin of this rule, law, whatever, it's to try to keep kids from overdosing. It's try to keep kids from starting the gateway drug or going down the wrong path. My girl's great. She's going to do fantastic. She doesn't need this overreach of power. And I really, the next time, if there is a next time, because I got to believe we're trending that way, I don't know. I'm going to review other options because I'm done taking my daughter for a drug test. And lastly, as we left the facility, this was Friday, one of the members there, workers, I think they work there, said, that freaking Altapan High School, it's always them. They load up this place for people for drug tests. So I have no reason to make this up. I was not surprised to hear it, but that's what was said. That's all I want to share.
Thank you. You hear that?
No, it's okay.
And everybody's going to speak, whoever's next.
Well, I'm Geraldine Tama.
Can you say it first so he can write your name down?
Geraldine Tama from Old Pan. I'm actually going to read first what my daughter prepared. She was afraid to come tonight, so I'll read for her. On Thursday, January 27th, I was in the bathroom while somebody else was vaping. Unbeknownst to me when I walked in and went straight into the stall. There was a total of 4 of us in the bathroom when a teacher walked in, supposedly looking for another student. I was walking to wash my hands and the teacher wrote all 4 of our names down. The 2 other girls who were not vaping and I went straight to the office by choice before the teacher reported us to go and clear our names before it got out of hand. I have never seen the teacher that walked in before, nor do I know her name. The other girls in the bathroom also have never seen this teacher before. Even though I was not doing anything wrong in the bathroom that day, my bag was still searched thoroughly, and I was sent for a chemical screening as well as a breathalyzer test. The school held me in the office for the rest of the day, so I missed my Spanish class where we were reviewing for a test the next day, and my gym class where we had our final day of gym volleyball. I was extremely upset and crying to the point where I could not get a word out to Mr. Spatz, head of guidance at my school, and Mrs. Meralda, an assistant principal, who were in the room when my bag was being searched. When my dad came to the school to pick me up to take me to this drug test that we both did not consent to, we spoke to Ms. Meralda, one of the assistant principals at my school. She said it was protocol and that I would be suspended for 5 days if I did not take the drug test. even though my bag was searched and nothing was found. I was also not examined by the school nurse. Would have been fine, she would have been sent for the drug screening anyway. Just by me being in the wrong place at the wrong time, my day, and frankly, my school experience as a whole was ruined. The next day, Friday, January 28th, I had to bring in the paperwork from my drug test into the office. It was humiliating to show my face there, even though, once again, I did nothing wrong. I am now afraid to use the restroom in school, where I am supposed to feel safe and comfortable. And as for why I am bringing this up today, is that this policy must be changed. I cannot imagine someone like my younger sister being wrapped into a situation like this. We need to speak out against this policy in hopes of a compromise so that nobody feels unsafe or uncomfortable at their school ever again. No student at either district in the Valley, or frankly, any district anywhere, deserves to feel like they are an outcast and looked down upon by their peers and their administrators. These are the words of a 16-year-old, my daughter, who had to go through this. That's all I'm going to say, because I think my husband's going to speak.
Thank you, Joel.
So I guess I'll dub to Michael Tam, Old Japan. We didn't see each other, so I didn't realize my daughter Alexandra was going to prepare that statement. So I prepared something. I'm just going to read it. You know, there's going to be some of this is going to be a little reiterated, but you know, obviously she was caught in a crossfire. I think this policy is misguided. Her crime was going in the bathroom. Her punishment was nothing less than a force of administrators violating her, forcing her to leave school for a mandatory, unnecessary drug test due to a mere suspicion from a faculty member that another girl was vaping in the bathroom. Obviously, it was humiliating. I was with her. She had to hold her urine for an hour. She had to take a breathalyzer like a common criminal. Dr. Sabatini, again quoted tonight, NJ, I scheduled a meeting with Dr. Sabatini and Dr. Hyman after this. You know, we try to be parents that are very involved in the school and our kids. He continued to quote 18A-4A-12, which is again reminiscent of A4454 that also gets quoted here regarding the CRT curriculum, whereas just a whim of a faculty member can drag the kid out of school and subjugate them to a humiliating experience, again at the taxpayer expense. I didn't even know this about Bob and Tara, but the same thing happened when we went down to Dumont. They said that MDOT is constantly wasting our time with this nonsense. We have real patients to take care of. You have to tell them to stop. So that's neither here nor there. Again, we mentioned about the 5-day suspension. She lost her mind when she heard that, but she didn't want to be out of the learning for 5 days, given her workload. And the vice principal said this was due to her safety, that we had to subject her to this. I find that highly offensive, that the safety of my daughter, you guys don't have to worry about the medical safety of her daughter. I want my daughter to be safe in school, have qualified security guards in place to save her from a bullet, but the medical safety is my God-given right and my wife's God-given right. So I find it offensive that they try to hold that over her head, that this is for her safety. It's not the administrator or teacher's job to parent our kids. It's not their call to subject our children to ridiculous interpretations of laws for bureaucratic ass coverings and indoctrinations. Teachers and principals are paid to teach. The board is elected to put the proper people in place to educate. Nobody's paid or elected to be a state-run co-parent with the values of a hyper-secular, status-minded teachers union. My daughter's rights were violated on a teacher's impulse. My parental rights were violated when I forced to submit to a stranger's judgment on my child's medical welfare. And I'm pretty sickened by that. But I'm going to tell you what's really bothering me is that there's no solution in place. After meeting with Dr. Sabatini and Hyman, who were frankly both gentlemanly and generous with their time, I walked out unsatisfied. I still do not know who is interpreting this law in this district. Dr. Sabatini said tonight, I have no choice. He's not a lawyer. Who is telling Dr. Sabatini that if a teacher or faculty member has a whim or a suspicion that they could drag these kids out of school and away from their learning, otherwise face a 5-day suspension? I really hope this gets answered tonight. So when asked if my daughters can once again be caught in this crossfire for simply using the bathroom, they said yes, and maybe she should consider not going to the bathroom when other kids are in there, or maybe use the nurse's bathroom. This man is terrifying my daughter, and she's now second guessing, like my wife said, her bathroom habits. And I'll close with this. How can you possibly believe you have the capabilities of tackling complex issues such as gender dysphoria or the supposition behind racial inequalities when you have kids give a remote thought if they should be performing basic bodily functions throughout a school day? Maybe you guys should start less ambitious and consider a very good bathroom policy, or consult an attorney and see if you guys are frankly interpreting this law incorrectly. I'm supposing you're not. I think you guys are overreaching on this law just for bureaucratic purposes. That's it.
If I can follow up with one question.
You're
Geraldine Tama, am I allowed to ask my question? Because I didn't ask my question. I spoke for my daughter. Now I'm not allowed.
You can move quick. If you just have a question, I'll take it. Yep.
Okay. I was told by Dr. Sabatini that when I met with him that the school could do better in providing a safe place for my daughter to go to the bathroom, and so that she wouldn't have to find a bathroom in the school without 2 or 3 students in there, or perhaps use the nurse's room and wait there 10 minutes. And he said he could do better. He said maybe they could hire a hall monitor, maybe they could hire a female custodian, or again, whatever school administrators think. That was a month ago. I want to know what the update is. Where do we stand? Do we have a safe place for girls to use the bathroom so that they're not going to go in there with fear, having to bring a friend to stand at the door to make sure they're not going to be ripped out and accused of being on drugs?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have 2 comments. Dina O'Rourke, Oldham.
Okay.
The first is following up on what Kathy and Donna were talking about with the drug testing. The drug testing. Aren't there nurses who can assess whether or not these kids are really under the influence before we send them out? I would think that would be a step to save a lot of trauma and wasted money. Secondly, reasonable suspicion. Does that mean if a kid falls asleep in class, he's going to be drug tested? Because I have heard of that happening before. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I would like to clarify once and for all whether stamped is required for NVOT or not. There are many 9th grade parents who are very upset that this is required now, and it sends a mixed message. If it is not required for the school, why is the teacher assigning it, and why is that okay with administration? That's it.
Thank you. Okay. Motion to close to the public? Need a second?
And, it's a difficult concept to understand. It's much different than what we see on TV or what the law enforcement has to follow when they need probable cause. So in a school district, when a student is referred to an administrator as possibly being under the influence, the school administrator has no choice but to send that student for a medical examination. And our policy reflects what the student law is. And I understand, first I want to say I really appreciate the parents coming out and sharing these stories. I'm not obviously permitted to discuss individual cases. I'm sure you all understand that. But I do empathize with you as being someone who has walked many parents through these situations as an assistant principal, as a principal. It's hard to deal with. These are the laws in the state of New Jersey. Once a staff member has reasonable suspicion, they are mandated to report it to the administration, and the administration has to follow the law. There's no wiggle room. There's no judgment that is permitted by the administrator, okay? You have to follow the policies and the laws related to this, and it can be hard to go through. So, I know you may be looking for answers or something to help ease this process, but really, once it gets reported, the train leaves the station for us as administrators. So,
could we clarify what reasonable suspicion is? Is there like a set of boundaries of what's considered suspicious? I mean, being in the bathroom might not.
So, being reasonable suspicion is defined for educators. They get trained each year on it. It could be anything from aberrant behavior, it could be smell, it could be, speech, right? It could be anything. And we train our teachers on it. And
In all respect, wrong place, wrong time?
Have to do it annually. And I mean, if the teachers know the students best, if they feel someone is
My daughter never saw the teacher
dozing
before.
off in class.
Those I understand, but being
If
in
they
the
walk into a
bathroom-
room and they see a cloud of smoke and they can't figure out who is responsible for that cloud of smoke, they have suspicion that
Well, would they
there's
have
something.
searched their bags and then found
So I'll weigh in, are you done with, on this topic, I'll weigh in on it.
paraphernalia at that point?
I'd also like to say one thing too.
Yeah, just my only opinion on it, especially with what Tam has said, when you hear, it's all about the kids, right? When you hear a kid is afraid to go to the bathroom again, and 15, 16-year-old girls and boys have enough stress, and so I see what everybody's saying. So what James is saying is true. Once something gets reported and there's reasonable suspicion, we could talk about what that means. The train has left the station, there's all these requirements. However, what can we do, and I'm just thinking out loud here, what can we do to eliminate the possibilities of the wrong place, wrong time? Listen, I would agree, I think we all agree, if a kid's just sleeping all day in class, he leaves himself open to maybe he is high, maybe he's not, maybe he's just tired. But to try and eliminate the wrong place, wrong time thing with kids, maybe we can have somebody, I don't want to say stationed in the bathroom because that sounds kind of intrusive, but if you had, like you said, a female custodian in the girls' bathroom or vice versa or whatever, where if there was somebody there, then nobody could say, hey, just because she was in that room, we're testing everybody in that room. Somebody could say, no. Well, first of all, I think if you park somebody there, maybe less people would go there and vape, right? Step one, right? And step two, if somebody comes in and sees an adult standing there and they still vape, well then shame on them, right? And then if you're busted, you're busted. But that way, if there's some confusion, the adult can say, hey, so-and-so was in the stall going to the bathroom, and more than anything else, that would make the kids feel more comfortable. The kids that aren't doing anything wrong feel not afraid to go to the bathroom. So if we are restricted by what we can do based on when something does get reported and there are state laws and what you have to do, maybe we can eliminate some of the wrong place, wrong time kids and reduce the amount of kids that have to go through that process unnecessarily. So if anybody knows Dr. Sabatini, his life is in education. He's not purposely trying to stress out these kids, but if that ends up being the result, then we should see these workarounds, like I just suggesting off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think Ms. Thomas said that, Dr. Sabatini said that they were looking at ways to do better, so we checked with Dr. Sabatini.
That was a month
He has
ago.
in mind there.
Does the nurse assess them? I think that's the
I think
question.
the solution of I know that we do have increased our sweeps in the bathroom when people walk through, especially during lunchtime. So this isn't the first time that we've encountered students in the bathroom with a cloud of smoke, right? How many of us were growing up and you walk in and kids would be smoking cigarettes in the bathroom? This is a problem that schools face all the time. They have vape detectors, they have different strategies that they use to try to curb the use of any substance in school, whether it be tobacco or CDS. So, I'll check back with Dr. Sabatini and see what he has in mind to help with that, make it a little safer for the kids.
Just a couple of comments. I mean, we're putting a lot of trust in the assessment of the reporting teacher or the faculty member that they're doing it, that they're approaching it the right way. What's the procedure for assessing faculty and administration for those same instances? Well, we have a policy for children, but I'd like a policy for the people who are getting paid on the taxpayer dime. What's the policy?
No, it's the same for them.
It's the same.
Yeah. We've dealt with many.
And we've had this.
Yeah.
Is it the same teachers that are reporting?
No, she's saying, what if a teacher is high?
Oh, I see.
Well, I'm saying, right, I mean, we have these policies for the children. I remember when Kathy brought up, I wasn't on the board, but years ago, there was a push for drug testing. And I always felt that singling people out for drug tests would bring this kind of reaction. If you're going to drug test, you drug test everybody. Everybody has the opportunity to be randomly drug tested, especially our teachers and our administrators and the people that are earning a public dollar. So that was my problem. My feeling was you either went full bore with it and you had everybody subjected to it, or you did nobody.
I think that.
And go ahead.
I just wanted to say one more thing. I mean, I asked the question before about the drug testing, and I really feel very strongly on the subject because I feel like we're traumatizing these children at a point in their life where, you know, this is a life event, and we really need to, you know, be sensitive and empathetic to the situations. And so I'm sitting here thinking, you know, I heard Dr. Sabatini say there's no, quote, no judgment involved, but the entire definition of reasonable suspicion requires judgment. And so to Drew's point, it's the person who's reporting it who is applying judgment, right? It's before it gets to Dr. Sabatini, I think. It's the person who's witnessing the event who then has to apply judgment. And I'm wondering, is there ever a situation where a person walks into a bathroom, sees a cloud of smoke, applies judgment to the situation? I think it was these two. I don't think it was these four. You two come with me. You four go back to your classroom. Is that ever happening, or is it always everybody in the room has to go for drug testing?
Well, sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's easy, but sometimes it's not. You're dealing with high school kids. Sometimes it's really easy to figure out who, you know, whose vape it is, who had it, right? Sometimes you can see it.
And that's why, listen, that's why I say if we can just make it more clear by putting some kind of safeguards in place where it's.
I think the question is the judgment that's used. I mean, it doesn't have to be a group of kids in the bathroom. It could be a teacher with a one-on-one with a student that, you know, sometimes administration and teachers do the wrong things. It could be maybe they just don't like this person. Well, I'm not defending the student, but I'm defending the scenario. You know, look into what the justification is really all about. This one.
Jen Hohen would like to say something. Go ahead, Jen. Talk loud.
Sorry, everybody, I'm not here tonight. But I just want to say that, you know, Joe, I would really like to work with you on this. You know, I don't want to see any child be put in a position where they're uncomfortable going anywhere. And I do agree. I think that as a board, we need to figure out the best solution. It may not be an overnight solution, but there are certainly things that can be put in place, I would hope, in the interim, while we work further, potentially with the state.
Thanks, Jen.
Are we testing for nicotine at the drug test? So the vaping, they're just assuming it's marijuana, so it wouldn't be some sort of a
Tobacco
smell?
is on that drug screening.
Yeah.
Tobacco is
It says it in the policy.
What is
School policy.
How much does it cost?
So James, what is the state mandate or state requirement in terms of preliminary testing being done in the nurse's office?
Can't be done. Gotta be, doctor has to see a student. Nurse can't, the nurse can examine the student, the nurse has to examine the student.
So can the nurse examine the student for suspicion?
What's that?
Can the nurse examine the student for suspicion?
Only if the nurse felt that, only at the time if the nurse feels that the student is under the influence would they ever make a call on the suspicion. But if the student is referred to us, the nurse looks at the student before he or she leaves to assess whether or not we have to call an ambulance. We've had to call ambulances before.
If the nurse can't make the judgment whether the student needs to go for testing?
Absolutely not. Nope. That actually is
Sounds ridiculous.
The case that brought this law into New Jersey. The nurse was talked out of sending the student to testing by the administrator, and that is the genesis of the reasonable suspicion law in New Jersey. They said there is no discretion. Right, student died as a result of that, and they said that there is no discretion anymore. As soon as reasonable suspicion is reported by a staff member, the student has to see a doctor. they have to be examined by a doctor.
I know we're close to the public, just 1 second. Maybe as a point of reference to the girl who wants to spearhead this, check with the Dumont facility that flagged us 5 towns away and said, wow, Alta Pan again. And I'm not pointing fingers, I'm just saying, somebody was referencing data, I think it was Dr. Sabatini earlier. Like, gather some data. What are other schools doing differently that they don't grumble about when we're leaving the drug testing site? Like, we're 5 towns away.
No, I appreciate your comment.
Okay,
Thank
that's
you.
all. Thank you for listening.
And you gotta follow your policy. Parents are supposed to be contacted immediately. I was not
I hear you.
contacted for 2 hours.
We're close to
2
the public, but
hours.
I hear
Well,
you.
you're supposed to open
I'm
it
happy
again.
to discuss it further with you.
You're
If you'd
supposed
like
to
to
open again.
talk about it, we can talk about it further.
Your policy says you're supposed to open again.
So, I'm trying to look through my notes here. I mean, that was the biggest topic. Mr. You brought up enrollment issues. I guess at the local school level, they were discussing enrollment issues. We get enrollment projections up down to 5th grade. So we monitor it and track it. And if there are any issues, I'm sure that we will see the bubble coming. But I will reach out to the superintendents down there to see if there is any issues we need to be aware of that we're not seeing in the data that has been provided so far with their enrollment.
That also pertains to all the new developments that are going on.
Yep.
There's a big development being built in Hollis right now, yep.
Yep.
But I don't think the numbers are up right now at high schools. Not as this year.
Right. Yeah. The lower school is up considerably.
I don't know if there were too many other questions. You ready?
Surplus?
We were talking about stamps.
Oh, Mr. O'Rourke, yes, asked a question about STAMP. So STAMP was a book that was unanimously approved by the board, and it was approved as a resource for teachers to use. And there are some teachers who use the book as a resource. They use certain chapters from the book, my understanding, and mostly for the argumentative unit, I believe. They do use certain chapters of the book. So you asked the question if the school requires it. No, the school does not require it, but there may be some individual teachers that use it for specific assignments. That may be the case, and the board did approve it as a resource for that.
Is there an opt-out option if the parents disagree with the context?
No, the only opt-out in the state of New Jersey would be for dissecting frogs and sex ed.
Okay, so what would we have to do to get that book banned?
Sorry?
What would we need to do to get that book banned from being a
The board
resource?
would have to vote to rescind it as a resource.
Okay.
I vaguely remember Dr. Kibble reporting at the November board meeting that book is no longer on the district curriculum.
Correct.
He said required.
It was approved unanimously by the board.
No,
Not this
in
board.
November 2020, but then in November 2021, he specifically addressed that book and said it is no longer on the district curriculum. It was never rescinded. No?
It was not rescinded by the board, but it is not required by the district or schools.
You're on the curriculum committee,
I am.
and now you're the chair. Maybe you can address that.
I will. And then Mr. Sundin also brought up a comment about cameras in the classroom. Has that ever been something that we've discussed as a board?
What was cameras in the classroom?
Having cameras in the classrooms?
Never been discussed.
Never been
Wouldn't
discussed.
even- Has not come across on our radar yet.
Kind of presume. During
I
COVID,
don't
you
think
have
that
it.
would be permitted.
In New Jersey or just overall? Is it a teacher's union thing?
I would look into it, get back, but I do not think it would be permitted or advised.
Surplus?
Okay.
The tax surplus? And the tax increase?
Well, the only thing I want to say is someone from the public said that a 2.9% budget is absurd, and I agree. That's why it will not be a 2.9% budget. I think what Mr. Vergasia said was that at the time of the committee meeting, at the meeting that always occurs at that time, the financial office, the business administrator, puts together a preliminary budget. They whittle it down, they get it to a number, come to the meeting, ask the board, hey, where do we need to get to, and then they go back to work. And GC, what did you say was the directive?
So the directive was to be well under 2%, is what we had asked the board, the business administrator to come back with.
And the business administrator, I believe, at the time said that that's the goal, and that's hopefully what will be presented in public at the next meeting, which is the tentative budget.
Please tune in to the next board meeting, which will be held on March 21st, 2022.